Okay, welcome back to the Hockey Cards Gongshow Podcast. It is episode 20, Troy. How's it going?
Episode 20. It's going good. Every episode it clicks up. Next week will be drinking age, so that'll be fun.
Yeah, so right now...
Drinking age in the U.S., I think. Other places that listen to this, I think it's 18, but we're getting there.
It was 18. I remember fondly as a young northern Minnesota boy taking a few trips to Thunder Bay to take advantage of the lower drinking age. But that was a different time and place for sure. A couple things out of the gate that I wanted to bring up. First of all, we will be launching, I don't know, whatever you call it, part 2 of our Hockey Cards 101 special series. This weekend, I believe, we're aiming for Saturday. Troy, we had a fantastic response to the first episode.
Yeah, a lot of good feedback. So
we're excited to release part 2 of that series. From a topic standpoint, we're kind of making it all about cards, what the different types of cards are, how to protect them, how to store them, all that sort of good stuff. So make sure that you're following us on your podcast app. And if you have any friends or know some people that were thinking about getting into collecting or interested in how you collect cards, but maybe need a little nudge and to feel a little more confident to get into the hobby, we definitely appreciate. And if you would recommend this series to them. Another note, Troy, is we're really close as of the time we're recording to 2,500 Instagram followers. I don't know if you've noticed that.
I've noticed it's ticked up. Do I need to create an account for my dog and have my dog follow us? Would that help push us to 2,500? She's joined the podcast a couple times, howling in the background.
Hopefully by the time this releases, we'll be there. It's pretty crazy after 4 months to get to 2,500 followers. So we're pretty grateful and amazed by that. According to what Troy's told me in the past, though, I think half of our followers are pecorine collectors that Troy's in cahoots with, but I don't care. I guess we'll take it. And if you're not following, we post daily content there. 90% of it is different from what we talk about on the podcast. So some other great hockey card content. So be sure to follow us there at Hockey Cards Gongshow. And last thing before we get into the game plan, Troy, we have a Patreon account. I guess that makes us the Patreon podcast. Basically, it's an account that we've launched. So you guys, if you want to, can help support us and support our growth. We've introduced this one tier, kind of what we're calling a Gong Show supporter tier to this point. It's $5 a month. Hopefully not a lot for you, but in turn, it would be a big deal for us. And basically, what we hope to use that money for is to continue to be able to provide you guys with more content, better content, and use some money to help grow the hobby, which is our stated mission. So, we also do plan to add some more tiers and benefit levels like you'll see with a lot of other shows. So I guess we'd be grateful if you guys can contribute, but completely understand if you're not in a position to do so.
Yeah, it's one of those things we've talked about a lot, and looking at other areas and how podcasts grow and how they support themselves, looking at different markets like video games or other people that I follow on podcasts. A lot of them do have Patreon at supporter levels at a low dollar amount just to try to get some support, because obviously a lot of the stuff we do, it's with the hosting and stuff, it does cost money. However, again, it's only if you can afford it, you have the means, and you want to do it. We'd be grateful. It just helps us grow. That's about the spiel we want to give on it.
Yeah, and last thing on that, if you are inclined to support us through Patreon, you can find a link in the podcast description of the app that you're listening to us on. And again, thank you all for your continued support. Okay, Troy, we got a lot to cover today, so let's get right into the game plan.
On today's show, we continue our rookie deep dive, and we take a look at Shane Wright with the Seattle Kraken. Next, we will continue our season previews by looking at the goalies that are intriguing to us for the upcoming NHL season. We follow this with hobby news. Then we have an interview with Chris McGill of Card Ladder around the current state of the card market. And finally, we end the show with new product releases and our personal pickups and or sales.
So this is week 2 of doing our rookie deep dive. And just to remind everyone, our goal in doing this is to start, it'll continue throughout the beginning of the season, to give everyone a little bit of basic background and profile information on some of these players whose rookie cards are coming out and who we're going to see that some have pretty high values or emerging values. And we want to make sure that everyone understands, at least at a basic level, who these guys are, what gives them their pedigree, and why people are into collecting them and they have a desirability within the hobby. So after last week, we did an Instagram story poll, kind of asking you guys who you wanted to hear about next. And the big winner was Shane Wright. He was picked over Lucas Reichel, Jack Quinn, and Yurov Slavkowski was the other guy. Thanks to everyone who voted on that. We'll probably do another poll because it was pretty successful for next week's Rookie Deep Dive. So again, if you're not following us on Instagram, be sure to do so at Hockey Cards Gongshow, and look forward to that coming out probably in the next day or two, I would guess. Okay, so let's talk about Shane Wright. So he's 18, pretty young yet, Troy. Pretty decent size, 6'1", 187, seems like the standard protocol, I guess, for a modern NHL forward. Right-handed shot, typically plays the center position. Was the 4th overall pick in the 2022 NHL entry draft just a couple months ago. Really a little bit of a disappointment, as we've talked about, as he was long considered the odds-on favorite to be the number 1 overall pick. Prior to entering the draft, he was one of 6 players to have ever been granted exceptional status, which was done for the 2019 OHL season and juniors, to enter the league at 15 years old. So he's played 2 seasons in Kingston of the OHL, and he scored 66 points in his first year and 97 points in his next year, respectively. I'm not a scout or anything like that, and so I didn't want to try to BS my way through, why he's considered a talented player. But I did look up some other respected writers and scouts, and here's one paragraph that stood out to me from a gentleman named Corey Prongman from The Athletic. And he says, Wright's game translates because of his compete and direct style of play. He takes pucks to the net and plays quick. He can pull up it to make tough pass, but he can take pucks to the interior too. I don't know. What do you read into that?
Yeah, I mean, that's the good things. Corey is also very honest on things he doesn't like about Wright. I know in the past he's kind of said there's nothing with Shane Wright that really blows you away. He does everything you expect him to do. And I think that actually probably hurt him when it came to the draft and him falling a little bit. So he definitely obviously has skill. Obviously was granted exceptional status, but there's things that just don't blow everyone away. And when you look at these draft picks and the hype that comes with them, that can actually hurt you if you're just really good player, but what's going to take you to the next level?
Yeah, that's real similar to, I guess, the stuff I've been reading, where it seems like the consensus is people will get up to like very, very good, but nobody seems to want to go into the great territory. Yeah. It's just a feeling that you get when you read more and more about him. It doesn't mean he won't get there, of course, but that, I guess, is everyone's consensus right now. Okay, so going forward, looking into this year, it's actually kind of interesting with Wright. It sounds like the Kraken do hope to have him play in the NHL this year, even though he's still only 18. Smartly so, the Kraken GM, Ron Francis, isn't anointing him a roster spot. He wants him to earn it, so he's been very vocal about that in the media. But there is a little bit of a predicament, Troy, that the Kraken have with Wright, in that he either has to make the roster out of camp or be sent essentially back to Kingston in the OHL for another year of juniors. The reason is there's some sort of rule that if a player comes from the OHL and is under 20, they're not allowed to play in the AHL the season after they've been drafted. Then if he does get sent back to Kingston, he can't be recalled back to the NHL till after the OHL season. So it kind of puts the Kraken in the spot where he either needs to make the team out of camp or basically doesn't have the opportunity to play on the NHL roster for the most of the upcoming season, which was a little new to me. I don't know if you've heard of any of those rules before.
I mean, who knows, might have read it in the past, but I don't know all the little details about the OHL and the agreements. I'm assuming that's in like the collective bargaining agreement with all the rules and regulations around that stuff. That's very interesting. So it's either he makes it out of camp and then he has to stay with the team the whole year. Is that how I'm reading that? He can't be sent out. That's very interesting. I mean, it gives him more motivation, and I've always said I'm on the Shane Wright revenge tour train, because I think if I was him, I'd be really ticked off with how the draft went and want to prove myself.
Well, I think, too, it makes it probably more likely he does make the roster, because even if he's close, the Kraken are going to sit and think, if we can't send him to the NHL or the AHL, we don't necessarily want him to spend a whole another year in juniors. Let's just keep him on the roster.
Yeah, it's very interesting from a development standpoint with a young player. You see this in baseball too. It's like, do we send him to the minors, or he's really good? Do we keep him on the team and he doesn't play as much? Just a lot of interesting pieces with that.
So it's obviously going to have a big impact on his hockey card prospects for 2023. And if you're inclined to be a Wright collector, you're going to want to follow that story probably pretty close. If he doesn't play, he's obviously not in Series 1, Young Guns. If he doesn't make the team out of camp, I find it real doubtful he'd be in Series 2. I don't know if the OHL season ends early and he could come back towards the end of the NHL season, if even the Kraken were to somehow make the playoffs or something like that. I don't know, maybe there'd be an outside chance that he would be in extended. But you're probably it's probably more likely it'd be Series 1 of next year if he doesn't make the team out of camp. At least that's what makes most sense to me. So in that case, if there are still some Wright cards that we've talked about, he was in the Goodwin Champions set this year, 2021. There's an exquisite collection auto out of 99. That's again in the unlicensed Kingston jersey. Same thing with Metal Universe Champions, where he has a Jambalaya card and I think a PMG card as well as base cards. The only other set that you could find his cards he's in the 2021 Upper Deck CHL Team Canada, or he's in Upper Deck CHL. He's also in the 2021 Upper Deck Team Canada set. So nothing to date in a NHL uniform, or certainly with the Kraken, but it's all going to come down to how he, I guess his status on the roster coming out of camp.
Yeah, and with his cards and those unlicensed ones, I think we got almost a wake-up call for me on how much people do not like the unlicensed jerseys and stuff in Metal Universe Champions and probably Goodwin Champions. So we got a lot of feedback. They were very vocal, which is good. I mean, it was great to hear that.
It could be a case, though, if he does go back to Kingston and we're realistically another year without any NHL cards, and let's say he plays real well in juniors, which I think would be a reasonable expectation, that those cards could maybe have some upside. Just because of lack of really anything else if you're still high on his prospects. Well, that is our rookie deep dive for the week. Like I said, we'll probably do another poll and throw some more candidates at you guys on Instagram. And I don't know, I think it's kind of fun to look into these guys. So we'll look forward to keep doing it. Okay, Troy, you've done a whole bunch of research on goalies that you're interested in watching this year. I'm pretty excited for this, so I'll turn it over to you.
Sure. So on the season preview for the goalies, I kind of took the tact of looking at goalies that have potential to have great seasons and build on some of the potential seen last year in their play, or maybe someone in a new situation that could allow them to succeed and build on consistent stellar play they've had in the past. And maybe this kind of takes them to the next level. There will be some goalies on here that people are expecting maybe to have great seasons, like your Vasilevskis, your Shesterkins. I wanted to kind of get away from them because we'll talk about them, I'm sure, enough during the season. So I'm looking at a list that I put together of 5 goalies that, just from my standpoint, I'm pretty intrigued to see how they perform and what their season outlook could be. The first one I wrote down, and we've talked about him before, is Ilya Sorokin from the Islanders. He's 26 years old, and it was his 3rd NHL season last year, and he actually showed how good he can be. Even though he's with the Islanders, he played 52 games. He was 26, 18, and 8. 2.4 goals against average, was 4th in the league. He had a .925 save percentage, which put him 2nd, and he had 7 shutouts, which put him in 2nd. All for playing with the Islanders, which was pretty amazing. I've talked about this stat before, the goals saved above average. It was at 30, which put him 2nd overall as well. So he's a tremendous goalie, and he's one I've talked about before where sometimes he doesn't fall in that top tier when people talk about him, but technically he is just as good as Vasilevsky or Shesterkin. He is really good technically, and it's just getting in the right situation, and he can build with what he built with the Islanders last year. He was a finalist for the Vezina, which says a lot for when the team he was on. You look at his season, he should have another great year. And if the Islanders make the playoffs, it's probably because of him. It's one of those, the goalie is a big key for them, and he's really good, and they're going to have to rely on him heavily if they want to make the playoffs after missing last year.
Yeah, I wonder if a goalie's ever won a Vezina without making the playoffs.
Yeah, that's a good question. Right when you said that, I was like, I should have looked that up. It's a gong show, and sometimes I forget.
Somebody will chime in, but if anyone, probably Hasek, right? There's no way of all the what did he win, 7
with
Vezina's
Buffalo,
or something?
Yeah, with Buffalo, and that's a good point. Someone will let us know. So some things going in his favor this year is the Islanders don't have to start the season for 5 weeks on the road. I think it was 13 road games they had to start the season while their arena was being kind of finished or built. Wow. And they also got hit with a ton of COVID issues last year. So hopefully the COVID stuff's done. They'll be at their rink. They don't have to start on the road. I kind of mentioned his technical skills are good as any goalie in the NHL. And that if you talk to goalie coaches in the NHL, they all say it. He's fantastic. Looking at the Islanders specifically, not a lot's changed, which might not be the greatest. They did add a D-man. Alex Romanoff was kind of the big pickup. Could be another middle of the pack year. But Sorokin should continue. I still think he's coming right up on that prime age, at 28, 29 years old for a goalie. And he should continue to improve and have another great year. I don't know, Josh, if you have any thoughts on Sorokin.
Oh, I'm in, dude. I bought him all summer. So I'm heavily vested into his success this year and hoping that everything you're saying comes true. I bought a ton of his Young Guns. I bought a number of Young Guns French and then a few other platinum serial numbered rookies and stuff like that. So I'm definitely on Team Sorokin.
Yeah, I'm a big believer of him. The one thing against him is the Islanders and how he can, it's going to be on him a lot for how they perform this year. Just from a card value perspective, to give everyone some info, his 2020 Young Guns, PSA 10, it's a pop 127, so it's low. You can still find them here and there. It trades in around the 125 range, give or take. So to me, that's still relatively cheap. Now, again, he's an older goalie, or he's coming up on that older side of the age curve in a couple of years. I definitely like him. I think he'll have a great year. So I'm excited to see how he does.
Yeah, 127 seems suspiciously low from a pop perspective. I know there's a ton of raw cards out there. So I think if he does play well, you would expect that to go up. I wouldn't buy it based on the low top alone. My big question is, do you want to give people your address now for all your Islanders fans hate mail? Because dude, you went hard.
I might get a lot of hate mail. I like Sorokin. I didn't think the team did a lot. Maybe I missed something. Let me know, Islander fans, did I miss some big offseason signing or trade that you think will turn them around?
Well, the only thing I can say about the Islanders is I took my daughter to a Wild game last year, and it was Parise's homecoming.
Yeah.
He did look about 94 years old at that point, but I was impressed with Barzal. That dude can skate.
Yeah, he's definitely good.
Okay, who you got next?
All right, next, Jack Campbell. He is now with the Edmonton Oilers, and he is 30 years old. So right away, I'll talk about the age, getting up there. He takes over now. This is a guy coming into this situation, I'll probably mention a couple times, it's almost perfect for him. He takes over as the Oilers' number one goalie. Last year, he had a really good season with Toronto. He was 31, 9-6, 2.64 goals against, .914 save percentage, 5 shutouts. Now, with that great season, he did have a pretty bad playoffs. He was 3-4. He had a 3.15 goals against and an 8.97 save percent. So the great regular season didn't translate into the playoffs. Obviously, we've talked about Toronto's kind of playoff disappointment string they're on right now. And I think the funny stat was Zdeno Chara was the last active player that the Maple Leafs beat in the series.
In the playoffs.
Yeah, still struggling there, but I think with Campbell moving on, it's the absolute perfect position for him to coming in as the number one. He's going to a team that's loaded. It's still got McDavid. It's still got Draisaitl. He'll see the majority of the playing time. He does have an injury history, which he has to avoid this year to get the majority of the starts. Along with Edmonton, they still, they have that core that I mentioned. And I think Campbell signed a 5-year contract, and 3 of those years will have for sure McDavid and Draisaitl signed through them. And then I think in that 4th year, one of those guys comes up for a contract renegotiation.
And Kane too, right?
Yep, Kane's there. Yeah, so it's just, I'm really intrigued by him because of the situation he is going to be put in. And I read some recent interviews with him, and he's given all the right words. He feels he's valued. He knows he can be the number one. He has everything to play, and everything to prove, and he'll play up to the expectations and the team in front of him. So given all that, to me, he was I don't rank these guys 1 to 5, but for sure he's in my top 5 for guys I'm really interested to see how he performs.
Yeah, this is the change of scenery.
Yeah, for
right?
sure. And then
go ahead.
Well,
I was just going to say that the other thing he has going for him is, how do I say this nicely? I mean, he can't play any worse, right, than Mike Smith.
I would agree with that. I know we're kind of hard on Mike Smith, but I think this is a definite step up and an improvement for the Oilers.
Yeah. Okay. So once again, make sure all fan hate mail is written in care of Troy.
Yeah, I'm gonna get lots of hate mail for this one. I think just card value. He's a 2013 Young Guns, PSA 10. Obviously, this pop is so incredibly low. It's 26. If you find a sale, it's around the $500 range. Mm-hmm. His PSA 9, I thought I would look at that being like, oh, okay, that will have more. No, that pop is 15. So it's even less than the 10. And that, if you find a trade or a sale, it last one I could really find was 150. So there's not a lot of high-end graded cards out there. I'm sure there's the raws floating around, but this is 2013-14, lower print runs and all that stuff.
I would assume that if he does play well, kind of like you're saying, that this would be a good candidate to have a nice bump in value. And conversely, it'll tank if he stinks.
Kind of the story of all these guys. All right, number 3, and this first name I've always mess up. I think it's UC Saros. So Nashville Predators. He was kind of the tandem or backup to Pekka Rinne when he was there. And Pekka Rinne was like the father. Yeah, you like that Pekka Rinne guy? He was like the father figure to Saros, brought him under his wing. And finally, Saros has taken over since Pekka retired. So with Nashville, you got Saros along with Filip Forsberg. They were the driving force behind the Predators' playoff run last year. Now, Saros started 67 games last year. He was 38, 25, and 3. He had a 2.64 goals against, 0.918 save percentage. So he definitely had a workload. That's a lot of games for a goalie.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, is that kind of the max that you would expect a goalie to start?
Yeah, I mean, that's a lot of games. I think usually teams, if they're going to rely on their backup a little bit, they want the starter to maybe play around that 55 range and then give the backup anywhere from 25, 27, some amount in there. But some coaches totally rely on their starter and they might play him 70 games. We'll talk about a coach that does that coming up for one of the goalies. But yeah, 67 is definitely a lot. You got to manage that. You got to manage your time. You got to be in great shape. Just I'm going to go off on a tangent, but people I think sometimes forget how much goes into being a goalie, like during a game. I know I've seen studies where at UMD, their goalie during the game would lose almost 10 pounds in basically water weight. And what they have to do is sit there and they have to drink water after the game until they get back up to, a reasonable weight. They don't just let them leave after they've lost 10 pounds. They have to kind of manage that kind of nutrition angle of it. So it's a lot of games. It's really hard on a goalie. Saros has been the number 1 goalie for the past 3 seasons after taking over for Rinne. Last year he was the Vezina Trophy finalist. He did get injured at the end of the year and didn't play any playoff games. So that was one of the, he's got a little bit of an injury history, and it kind of stunk after such a great year to get injured and not be able to play in the playoffs. If he is healthy and he can do the same workload as much as it's probably not ideal, the Predators should have a chance, or they should make the playoffs. And with him in net, he's one of those guys, they're always in the game if he's in the net. Obviously, he's going to have off nights, but you start him, you're going to have a shot. Personally, looking at Saros, he, just from a technical standpoint, he's really good. He is really good at defending odd man rushes. If you ever go to NHL.com and you can look for the top 10 UC Saros saves, it's amazing how good he is on odd man rushes and how quick he can move and take away a shot on a pass. Because if you ever
about quickness?
Yeah, definitely about quickness and reading what's going on, reading body, reading stick. And there's a concept called the Royal Road. It's basically take a line, draw it right down the middle of the ice the long way. And if you can make a pass across that line and then a shot within, I can't remember the exact time, 1 to 2 seconds, your scoring rate goes up a lot. But he is really good at taking away that, even on those Royal Road plays. So he's definitely an elite goalie, and he will be an interesting one to watch this year.
Maybe if we get a podcast studio at some why we call it Royal Road Studios.
There you go. Always thinking. I like it. He's a 2015 Young Guns. Again, super low pop. I actually have one. I actually don't have a PSA 10. I have a raw sitting in my box, but it's a pop 54. It goes around 115. To me, that's an interesting play if you can find it for sale. Obviously, it's got to start out and not get injured and not get worked to death.
Sure. Yeah, contrary to Troy to what you might think, I actually do listen to you, and I have been sneakily buying some Yusei Saros rookies over the summer. I think I bought a number of different platinum variations. I don't think got any Young Guns, but trying to stock up a little bit on him too.
Well, so instead of all the hate mail, then it's going to be you at my front door going,
when I lose all my money.
Hey, these guys are supposed to be good. What happened? No, I think they're all good. If you're on this list, I got faith in you. All right. Now, next one. This one might be a little obvious to people. He's obviously a person I collect, Jake Ottinger. I've watched him since he was in youth hockey, high school. I've always been impressed by him. Obviously, he comes in as the darling still off of the playoff run last year. And it wasn't even a playoff run. It was one series, but he was just amazing in net. And I think it was pretty amazing when you had pundits or people calling for him to be the Conn Smythe winner after losing in the first round. That, to me, is kind of funny. I don't know if they were tongue-in-cheek, but he did played awesome. So last year, he was 30, 15, and 1. He had a 2.53 goals against average, .914 save percentage, and 1 shutout. But the playoffs, obviously they lost. He was 3-4, but he had a 1.81 goals against and a .954 save percentage. That is pretty crazy. He was fantastic. I remember watching the games and then texting you. I'm like, "Did you see that save? Did you see that save?" He was all
crazy.
Over the place. Obviously, Ottinger, he was one of those. You didn't know if he was going to start last year. There was I think they had 3 goalies going in Dallas, and it kind of just worked out. He's got a short track record, obviously, in the NHL over the past 2 years. He's 41, 23, and 8. But he has a 2.46 goals against average in those 2 years and a .913 save percentage. So definitely good numbers.
He also got paid.
Yes, so he did get paid. They put their faith in him. Yep, they put their faith in him. I go back to that playoff thing, too, because this is another crazy stat. Even though he only played 1 series last year, he had the second highest total goals saved above average of any goalie in the playoffs at 11.9. It was higher than Shesterkin and Vasilevsky, which... who knows? Maybe if they play more series, that it goes down because he lets in other goals. But to play one series and lead the league in that stat's pretty crazy.
Can I make one clarification too?
Yes.
When Troy says he watched Jake Ottinger play youth hockey, it doesn't mean Troy is creepy. Well, it could mean you're creepy, but Ottinger is actually from exactly from where we live.
Yeah.
So
yeah, he's from the area, but he moved on, went to different teams and played at a different high school, but. We heard about him forever, and just not that I went to every game, but I was at the rink sometimes, and he'd be out there. And definitely good.
Troy got his autograph when he was 9. He just waited outside the arena and said, "I believe in you, kid. Sign this sticker." It's like you put it on a hockey card.
Yeah, here's this notepad. Please sign. No. That's one thing I'm not really a big auto get from guys, and the Stars this year, they should be a playoff contender, and Ottinger should be the guy in net. They've made the commitment. He should be the number 1. His Young Guns is a 2020. PSA 10 is pop around 160, and it's really ranged around crazy a bit the last couple of weeks. It's 150 to 190 area. Personally, for full disclosure, I have an SGC 10 version of this Young Guns, which was cheaper. When I got it was 100, and I think it goes for 110 now.
I think to me for Ottinger, it's just going to come down to how good the team is.
Yeah.
Other than Robertson, who obviously is really good and oddly undervalued from a hockey card value perspective, I guess. I don't know if I love their team. Probably Troy, as you know, because they have the marshmallow thrower on there.
Is he still there? Is the Suter still there?
Oh yeah, who I can't stand. So I call Ryan Suter the marshmallow thrower because for the 10 years or whatever he's on the Wild, for many of those, which we had season tickets and we're at games, fine, he's a good player. He's really good at being on the ice all the time and making that entry pass or whatever the heck you call it. But when the dude shoots, it's so soft.
Yeah.
And so it's you could only truly appreciate it when you're in person. I used to tell Troy all the time, it's like he's throwing marshmallows at the net. Every goalie should be embarrassed that lets one of those in. So I'm sorry.
So now every Ryan Suter fan, you can email Josh, or you can send Josh your
care of
your
Troy.
Yeah, your hate mail. One thing I forgot about Dallas, just popped in my head. They do have a new coach, I think. Pete DeBoer took over, if I remember right, in Dallas. So they got to get used to a new system, which obviously when a head coach comes in, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. I think I saw their first or second exhibition game or preseason game this year. It didn't go very well. So the pundits already coming out and saying, oh, the new system, how's it going to work? But
yeah, how does that affect a goalie?
I don't know. It depends. Where it affects the goalie is what kind of style your team's going to be. Are you going to be an offensive style, or are you going to play defense? You can be a neutral zone trap team, even though I don't know if they run modified traps now. They don't do a lot of straight up New Jersey Devils neutral zone traps from the 90s. But yeah, most goalies can adjust. It just depends. I mean, very defensive systems like the Wild, they really do a good job at limiting the shots on goal. But very offensive teams that might do a 3-man forecheck. Some teams do that. You might give up more odd man rushes, but they're counting on scoring more than they give up.
Does any team play the old Jacques Lemaire dump and chase anymore?
No, I'm sure someone does. Or every once in a while you have to if you're doing a line change. But the dump and chase, every analytics study has proven how blatantly bad that strategy is. So youth hockey player, if you have a youth hockey player and their coach is teaching dump and chase, you got to have a talk with them. Dump and chase is long gone. It's zone entries.
Well, yeah, I'll leave the analytics to you. I'll give you the fan perspective. Having had to watch that for how many years do you have to watch that?
Oh, jeez.
It's like, oh, we got the puck. Let's dump it in and turn it over right away half the time.
Theoretically, it's like, why would you give up possession? You want controlled zone entries. You want to have control of the puck when you enter the zone. So yeah, dump and chase, I think, is long gone unless the specific times you need it, like obviously a line change or something. You got to get people off the ice. So that was our fourth one. So our fifth one, I'm trying to make this a little quicker. Fifth one is I put down Jacob Markstrom. And when I first started putting down my list, I didn't really think about him. But the more I kind of did some research, I was kind of intrigued by him. Last year he was awesome. He was 37, 15, and 9. He had a 2.22 goals against and a .922 save percentage. And he led the NHL with 9 shutouts, which I didn't know. And then you look at his history, and he's one of those goalies. He's just consistently gotten better every year. And he's also the oldest goalie on this list. He's 32. And he'll probably turn 33 during the season. So he's definitely getting up there in age. Now,
was he not great in the playoffs? Do you remember?
I can't. I should. I didn't write his playoffs numbers down. I should have done that. Fail on my part.
No, that's okay. I seem to remember that. I'm obviously not a huge Calgary guy. He's a Calgary, right?
Yeah.
Boy, that was a brain fart. But I feel like he was maybe not the best in the playoffs.
Yeah, I'm gonna actually look it up just so he was 5. So last year he was 5-7. He had 2.95 goals against and a .901 save percentage. So definitely down from his excellent season, but yeah. So a little struggle in the playoffs. Yeah, 5-7. I said that. So yeah, thanks for that. That's a good point to bring up. Yeah, but he is one of those guys. When you look at his seasons, he's actually progressively gotten better as he's gotten older, which is good. But now he's getting up there. He's 32. So
do you think do you think that he knew that Johnny Hockey and Tkachuk wanted to leave and he was sad about that and that hurt and knowing that it was coming to an end and that hurt his time in the playoffs? Or
I don't know. I don't know. He could be sad over them leaving, but the Calgary still, I mean, they got a good coach. Daryl Suter is their coach. And when I was talking earlier about the coaches, he is defensive minded. Like he's very defensive focused. So he kind of protects goalies that way. So Markstrom, maybe even as he's getting up there in age, he still can thrive in that system. But then when I kind of mentioned that earlier, Daryl Sutter does not care one bit about workload. And he's almost stated that in the past, and he will play Markstrom a lot. And I think maybe that's part of the reason he maybe struggled at the playoffs last year. He's
pretty old school.
Yeah, for sure. And Markstrom played 63 games in the regular season.
Wow.
So it's just that workload and managing that. But that's something he's going to definitely have to deal with. He was a finalist for the Vezina Trophy last year. So he definitely had a good regular season, and then just things kind of got away at the end. Obviously, if you
Big dude too, huh?
Yeah, that's my next point. I was like, if you look at him, he's a huge goalie. I mean, 6'6", and being 6'6", he's very athletic, which you have to be as a goalie. Taller and bigger you get, sometimes they struggle, but he's a fantastic athlete.
Just a little bit of a Calgary tangent here. I did see that Huberdeau scored this weekend in the first preseason game. And you talk about the Shane Wright revenge tour. Could that only be eclipsed by the John Huberdeau revenge tour? He seemed pissed that the Panthers traded him. And I don't know. I'm kind of high on Huberdeau this year.
Well, part of it's probably, it doesn't feel wanted. Part of it might be, hey, there's, living in Florida is probably pretty nice during the winter. And when you have to, now you're being Calgary, I don't know if that affects some people or some players and how they think. It obviously, I think, affected Kachuk going the other way. It's saying, yep, I'm out of here. I want to go be in the sun.
I think Huberdeau is from the area, though, isn't he?
Is he? He might be. That's probably true because, you got a good shot of saying he's from Canada, and you're probably 60-70% right.
Is your favorite part of the podcast when I ask you questions?
Yeah.
Realistically, you're not going to know.
Oh no, I like thinking about it though. Hey, it's like the Google interview questions, right? Or the how many pennies are stacked up to reach the top of the Empire State. So,
Troy, what's the meaning of life? No, okay.
40, was it 42? Was that?
Yeah.
All right. So for him so let's just wrap Markstrom up. For him to be successful, he's got to continue to play at a high level while managing that workload if he wants to be a top 5 goalie this year. Personally, I think he can do it, but I think Suter might run him into the ground. So that's the only concern with him. And then from a card perspective, which I texted you last night. I was getting worried. I was completely losing my mind. He does not have a Young Guns. So there's no Jacob Markstrom Young Guns. And then we actually found a list on Reddit that had other people that are kind of known names that didn't have Young Guns. So that was an interesting read. I looked at, he does have a 2010 SP Authentic Future Watch Auto out of $999. And I just found some raws that went around $60. Obviously, he's older. I don't know what to say from the value perspective, but if he can have a good year, maybe there's a small bump.
If they win a cup.
Yeah, win a cup for sure.
Yeah, that is crazy that it isn't a Young Gun. I was thinking this is probably deserving of a segment of its own on a future show. But given that now there's 50 Young Guns in Series 1, 50 in Series 2, and 50 in Extended, the odds of a player like this not having a Young Guns 10 years from now has to be almost close to 0, right?
Oh, yeah, for sure. And, this is kind of interesting because I started thinking, I wonder if Upper Deck should do, actually, let me stop. Tops in the past has done cards that should have been, and they'll actually make a card of an older year of a player that should have been. I always wondered if Upper Decks thought about doing a Young Guns that should have been, and maybe that's too much muddling the Young Gun brand. But I think it'd be interesting because there's definitely other players that have not got Young Guns.
Well, you seem to make a sport out of giving Upper Deck product ideas. So maybe this is another one that you can add to your list. That's actually a really good idea, though. I would think that that'd be pretty cool.
That's the goalie list for me, the 5 that I'm very intrigued by. And as the season goes, we will still hit on those other goalies that we didn't mention here. But please, I would love feedback. I would love to hear what our listeners think. If I missed, if there's someone you think should have been in this list that wasn't maybe the obvious choice, I'd be interested to hear that. Or any thoughts and ideas you have on the people I did select and maybe a point I missed or something you don't agree with. I'd love to hear it.
Yeah, so just to recap again really quickly, we had Sorokin, Jack Campbell, Jussi Saros, Ottinger, and Markstrom. I'm pretty on board with Sorokin, Saros, and Ottinger. Little bit iffy, but I'll trust your judgment on, I guess, the older gents. And I have one really last goalie question for you before we move on. Is it weird to you that a Young Guns applies to a goalie too? I mean, I guess I understand why it does.
This is crazy. I actually thought about that last night. It just popped in my head. And I was probably when I was looking for that Markstrom, and I was like, Young Guns. Guns, I think, more of shooting and forwards and scoring. Yeah, it is weird, but it's so established now. I don't think you can change it to something else. But it is weird. It's one of those things that just it doesn't make that much sense. But I guess you could, in a way, get yourself there to where Young Gun is a goalie because they're young, they're brash, they're a rookie. I don't know.
Yeah, it rolls off the tongue better than fresh brick wall or something dumb like that. But it's kind of interesting to me. Okay, well, great stuff on goalies, Troy. We'll see if I make money based on your selections or if I, like the usual, lose everything. Okay, we want to transition to hobby news real quick. I want to start this week with some, I guess, training camp notes and rumblings. The preseason has started. One of the things that's always been strange to me about hockey is they go from like one practice into games.
Well, and
so you must be.
We got to remember too. A lot of these guys are practicing during the summer. They all get together, and
sure.
So it's not like they come in just like back in the '80s. They probably came in after 3 months of partying and having fun, and then had a practice, and then they had to get back into game shape.
Well, along those lines, I was just going to mention that the expectation must be that you come into camp in pretty good shape. There is no.
You got to take a physical the minute you get there, and if you fail it, you're in trouble.
So I think to me, the things that I'm looking for in the preseason are, number one, following injuries, because that's a bummer always. And then seeing how the young guys really do. Again, it's the preseason. There's a lot of split squad stuff going on. It's not necessarily they're going against the top goalie or the top defensive pairings or anything like that. But I think it still is meaningful when they produce. So we'll start with the injuries real quick. I may have missed one or two, but the one of note that I did find, Troy, is that Brock Besser did injure his hand at practice. It did require surgery, and he's out 3 or 4 weeks.
Yep.
He's a hockey player. I'm sure he'll be fine. And there's not a ton of value to Besser, but Minnesota kid, you always got to throw that in.
Yep.
And hopefully he recovers soon, and it doesn't really hamper the start of his season. Moving on to the initial 3 or 4 days of preseason games, there have been a number of standouts from a rookie perspective. We'll start with our guy, Marco Rossi for the Wild. So during their first game against the Avalanche, Rossi started the game a little quiet, but then Kaprizov, who was playing well, got hit in the ankle by a Freddie Gaudreau slap shot and had to leave the game. So they basically moved up Rossi into that Kaprizov. Jeez, can't say his name right. Spot, and he played amazing. He had 2 assists, including in overtime on a game winner to Ryan Hartman. And if you read all the stuff coming out of the Wild beat writers, that he really looked like he belonged. So again, he's one of the rookies that Upper Deck is definitely focusing on, especially in Series 1. So that's good news for him. A couple young rookies from last year had a pretty good strong start to the preseason from the Blues. So Jake Neighbors scored 2 goals in the first game and also had an assist. And then Scotty Prunovich had 2 assists in the same game as well. So nice to see that. Another couple of Minnesota kids out of Stillwater, Noah Cates scored a goal in his preseason debut for the Flyers, and his older brother, who plays for Jackson, who plays for the Flyers as well, scored.
Oh, that's cool.
From a Sabres perspective, Jack Quinn scored a goal in his preseason debut against the Capitals. JJP, John Jason Peterka, had an assist. Vasily Podkolzin for the Canucks scored a goal in his preseason debut. Cole Caulfield, last year rookie, looks picking up where he left off, scored a goal in his preseason debut. And Matty Beniers for the Kraken scored a goal as well. Right. So again, I wouldn't rush out and spend $20,000 on Matty Beniers cards, but and I think a point that I made to you earlier, Troy, what's really relevant here is a lot of these guys aren't necessarily guaranteed a roster spot. Mm-hmm. So I don't look at this as much like, Jake Neighbors scored 2 goals, who's going to have 90 goals on the year. But I think that if he can put a couple of games like this together in the preseason, it dramatically increases either making the roster or where he kind of starts the year from a top 6 or bottom 6 perspective. Yeah. Okay, so that's our, I guess, news and notes on where we're at in the preseason. Regular season's not too far away, which is pretty awesome. A couple other notes from around the NHL that I thought were interesting. This one's not super hockey card related, but did you see, Troy, that now the NHL is allowing teams to basically put their advertising patches on the fan jerseys that are sold?
So I did. You sent me the note and told me that. And actually, I think this might have a little more impact on hockey cards than we think. Just from comments we've read in our Instagram posts, a couple people were kind of on this patch thing. Sure. Obviously, they had them on the helmets last year, but now with patch being prominent on the jersey, does that affect anything? I thought about it, and then I was like, well, how many times? I went and started looking through my hockey cards. Every card you have, there's usually an ad in the background on the board, so I don't know if it really affects anything. It's just one of those things that I think you're going to get to with the fans.
Well, yeah, I think from the fan perspective, these jerseys are not cheap, especially if you get the authentic ones. And so do I want to spend, I don't know, what are they, $300 up to now to rep some, Ford Motor Company on my fan jersey. The one thing from a hockey card perspective that crossed my mind, what do you think the odds are that in the cup we have a RPA of some rookie with a Doritos patch?
Well, they do. I mean, they do the laundry tags. I mean, it's not a big jump to then pull in, like, maybe they have like part of the actual patch and then part of the Doritos. I would crack. Is there really a Doritos? There better be a Doritos patch.
I don't know. Here's my Shane Wright RPA Frosted Flakes.
That'd be sweet.
I don't know. It just seems like that's where the world is heading. And
yeah,
you can complain about it all you want, but I don't know if what's going to change in that regard. Another piece of big news coming out of our friends from Canada is they are dropping vaccine requirements and I think the mask mandate as far as flights go and entering the country. Is that right, Troy?
Yeah, that's what I read. And that's actually, I know that was kind of this hanging over the NHL and the players and how Canada travel is going to work this year. But it looks like that's all going to be resolved October 1 when the new rules go into effect.
Yeah, and so political and beliefs aside, that's not for us to get into, but the effect of it is it'll make it a lot easier for people to get to and from Canada. It'll help people that want to travel, maybe up to Winnipeg to watch the Wild play the Jets, which is always a big sort of rivalry out of proximity here, or going to Toronto, something like that. Coincidentally, it should probably good news for the Expo November 2 for Americans that are planning to travel to Canada for that. I guess that's a sign of progress. And that kind of leads us into our card show shoutouts for the week. We did have one. So this is a reminder to everybody. We are happy to shout out any local card shows on our podcast. That's part of what we want to do to help grow the hobby. And so be sure to message us. Probably the best places would be Facebook or Instagram to do that. And give us as many particulars as you can because people are going to want details. It's also nice, too, if you include a link if the show has a website or a picture of the flyer or something like that so we can convey the best information. But this one is from Jedi Master Sergeant or Jedi Master Grant. So thank you to him for giving us a show to shout out. It's the Hofstra Card Show at Hofstra University in Long Island, New York. Looks like there's 400 tables and he says hockey heavy, which would be awesome. Is October 15th and 16th, so coming up in a couple weeks here. I think, Troy, you posted some information from their website. It looks like Saturdays 10 a.m. to 5 p.m., Sundays 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. There's cash-only admission, adult $15 per day, kids 12 and under are free, hockey-specific autograph opportunities. So it looks like Alex Kovalev, Billy Smith, and Chico Resch.
Yeah, those are the three I could find that were hockey-specific. They might have added more. And there's I think there was a different process to get autos. It was on the website, of course, like an idiot. I didn't write down what the website was, but if you Google it, you should find it. But yeah, if you Alexei Kovalev, Billy Smith, obviously goalie. Chico Resch was a goalie too. Actually, I liked Chico Resch when I was a kid. He was my parents. My parents liked him. He had a really good personality. He was kind of a funny guy.
And I'm the first to admit, Troy, that I'm not a great card show mind. Haven't attended a billion of them so I'm just probably coming at this from more of the consumer perspective, and this is maybe a controversial question, but don't you think card shows shouldn't charge entry fees?
It's a great question. I always thought they shouldn't, but there's obviously a cost, and maybe they want to get more people in for setting up and tables, so maybe they're trying to offset that cost.
Yeah,
but I get that. I would think if you want the most people to attend, obviously don't charge, but it's not. This isn't rare. I mean, I've seen lots of card shows charge.
Go to the Hofstra show. I'm not trying to, and especially if there's hockey, that's pretty amazing. Yeah. I just think it's always good when I see that. It's kind of weird that I have to spend money for the right to spend money on hockey cards. Maybe other people can educate on why card shows do that too. All right, so that's it for hobby news. Did I forget anything?
I don't think so. Sounds good.
Okay, so right now we are going to play an interview we taped actually yesterday with Chris from Card Ladder talking about the current status of the sports card market, looking towards the start of the NHL season. So we're going to go ahead and roll that interview now. All right, we are excited to welcome back to the Gong Show Chris McGill from Card Ladder. Hey, Chris, what's up?
Hey, Josh. Thanks for having me back.
So we had you on one of our first, boy, Troy, was it our first fourth show, maybe fifth show.
It feels so long ago, but it actually wasn't. It was only like a couple months ago.
And I think at the time what we did is we sort of looked at the sports card market as a whole. And I think that was probably around the beginning of summer. So we thought it would be a great idea, Chris, to have you back on and get a little update as we're headed towards we have the launch of the football season just kicked off a few weeks ago, and we have hockey and basketball coming up, of course, and just get a good perspective where the card market is. So I guess maybe I'll start there, if you don't mind, and just ask you, how would you describe the state of the overall card market right now?
Yeah, man, time flies, but you guys were very smooth that first podcast we did. I think I knew at the time that it was one of the first episodes, but that was, you guys are ahead of the curve on that for sure.
Well, thanks.
Here, kind of thinking about the state of the market today, choose your time horizon, because if we want to look at the last, the last 6 months or so, I think the hobby's been down. If you want to look at the last 3 months or so, it's been more of a mixed result. If you want to zoom out to a year ago, the hobby is pretty unambiguously down. And if you want to look at 2 years ago, it's unambiguously up. So it's been a roller coaster ride, in other words. And, I'm generalizing here because that's kind of what we have to do if we're trying to make big picture statements. But the hobby exists in different silos and different categories that can operate independently of each other. But, the thing I'm looking at is the Card Ladder 50, which was an index of 50 cards that was compiled in February of 2021 and has not changed its component parts since. And that index over the last year is down 7%. And
okay.
So for some context around what that 7% kind of represents, the S&P 500 is down 24% year to date. Bitcoin is down 60% year to date. And I don't think real estate, the real estate domino has fallen yet. But given where inflation is going, given how the Fed funds rate continues to tick up and it's becoming more and more expensive to take out a mortgage, the writing on the wall here is that all financial markets are correcting right now. And to the extent that sports cards are a financial market, I think something similar is happening there.
Yeah, it's hard to predict really anything right now, given the global and I guess aggregate uncertainty that exists in all financial markets. I do have to mention, though, we did do a social post this morning, so it's fresh on my mind. The hockey card market is up year to date 3%. So we take that as a W here at the Gong Show.
Josh, just real quick, I mean, hockey is bucking all the trends. So hockey is up 160% over the last 2 years. And remember, 2 years ago, we were 6 months into the pandemic. To be up 160% over the last 2 years with respect to the hockey index is that's unmatched by the other big sport categories. And even over the last year, hockey's up 12%. Over the last 6 months, it's up 7%. And I think maybe one of the reasons why is that hockey's just prior to it's sort of exponential growth. Well, it hasn't been exponential, but prior to the explosion that hockey's had, more than doubling over the last 2 years, hockey was a little more gradual than the other sports. And I think that more gradual, incremental growth makes sustaining growth more realistic, even in bear markets.
I totally agree with you on that part. A couple other things that we really, as Troy and I have thought a lot and talked a lot about what's led to the market having relative strength right now. It's last year we had a national TV deal for the first that launched and so you could see NHL games on national TV for the first time in 15 years. So obviously exposure goes way up for the game there. We've had 2 years really 3 years in a row of really phenomenal rookie classes, and that has an impact. Also, Upper Deck has been way behind in products, and so they're in this race to get caught up through all the pandemic supply chain issues that they had in getting product out. And so they're just kicking new products out left and right. And finally, Chris, where I really agree with what you just said is you look at like a Cale Makar, right? Who trying to come up with a comparison. He's the biggest rookie in the last since Connor McDavid. He's 2019 rookie, maybe like comparative to like a Justin Herbert or Joe Burrow in football. His top selling card is still like $26,000 or $23,000 or something like that, not $1.5 million. So I think that there's a lot of, it's a cheaper investment. I don't know if that's the best way to put it or not. And I think that you have people getting into the hobby for that reason too, is you can get a really good box of hockey cards for $300. You can't find a good box of basketball cards. It doesn't seem like to me for under $1,000.
Yep. I completely agree. Those are some great points. Stanley Cup was really great this year too.
Yeah. I know that you're in Dallas now, so we're going to have to find a way to get you to a couple Stars games this year and get the NFL bug. And I'm sure that's all you need is another hobby obsession.
I know. I will check out some Stars games this year for sure, though.
Okay, so one of the things I've been thinking about is, and I'm not sure if you've been following this as well. So we just had we're 2 weeks or we're week 3, I guess, of the NFL season right now. And we know that, and we're about 2 weeks away from hockey and a couple weeks from basketball starting as well. Are there any things that we could say that maybe that you've seen through how the start of the NFL season has affected that card market that we could use as potential indicators to predict what might happen in the other sports? Or are they just siloed enough where it's really hard to kind of draw correlations between them?
There might be some universal principles that apply across the board. One of them might be that when it comes to collecting active players, a lot of excitement builds up before the season, like right before the season. And so with football, I think that culminated with Justin Herbert's National Treasures 1-of-1 Shield autograph rookie card that sold for $1.8 million. That kind of is the epitome of the preseason excitement, and people, especially because this was one of the longer off seasons of the last couple of years, just because of the way that schedules and how the pandemic restructured how seasons played out, and now we're back on normal schedules, and it was a very long off season, and I just think there was a lot of pent up excitement that collectors and investors in the space kind of unlocked there in anticipation of the football season. And I think you'll see that probably with basketball and hockey too, that as the seasons get ready to officially begin, people are going to want to make their bet and pick the players that they'd like to have in their collection for the duration of the season and ride it out. So, but the funny part about that is, like clockwork, once the season starts, buying activity ticks down. And, people who made their preseason pickups, even if they see the player that they picked up doing pretty well, they still might be dismayed to see a 10 or 20% drop in value as the season kind of starts to play out, and then we get into the dog days of the season.
Yeah.
And then I can speak to in basketball, for the last 2 years especially, around the month of late February, early March, the basketball card index shows a pretty big uptick. That's true both of 2021 and 2022 as well. And I think maybe something to do with that is some of the playoff excitement starts to kick in. The All-Star game is over, and sort of where the season stands and where some of the performances stand is getting cemented, and people start thinking about history, and they start thinking about other players from other eras. And I think that's kind of when basketball reaches its apex, seasonal apex, is right around that February or March, or at least it has for the last 2 years. So, but yeah,
hockey is very similar in the late spring or early spring, I should say, is where you'll March, April, and then into May as the playoffs start. The other thing that we've noticed is we studied a lot this summer, sort of the concept of the off-season dip that happens in hockey, where the season ends right around June 15th, and then you have this layoff until October 15th, and where there's a natural dip of about, it looks like 20 to 30% for most players that occurs somewhere in the August or July-August timeframe. And what's interesting about what you said as it correlates to our tracking of that dip is where we see the prices have rebounded, especially last year, was right around November 1st. So a couple weeks after the season starts. So it's not maybe exactly correlated with the exact start of the season. At least that's what we saw from a hockey perspective. It's a little bit difficult too, because we had the whole pandemic in there. So it's hard to look back further than last year, because all the seasons, they were in bubbles and the seasons were short and all those sort of things. But so I guess what we're going to be really tracking is what happens around November 1st in the hockey card market as a sign of where the health is currently at.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Another component to the in-season cycle is that, if you look, if I look at the aggregate, if I look at the basketball index as a whole or football index as a whole, a lot of stuff gets washed away. So, for example, like in the NFL this year, two players whose markets have ticked up quite a bit since the season started are Tua and Jalen Hurts. And both of these guys have in common the fact that they didn't have unrealistically high expectations foisted upon them by the media or by collectors or by fans. And now they're both 3-0, and they've taken out some teams and games in which they were underdogs. Like Tua has been an underdog 2 straight weeks. He beat the Ravens, and then he beat the Bills this past weekend. And Jalen Hurts had a nice victory over the Vikings, where people were thinking the Vikings might be able to pull that off. So all of a sudden, you've got 2 young quarterbacks who have rookie cards within the last 2 seasons of product, and who have been overlooked in favor of some of the other quarterbacks who have maybe had flashier starts to their careers. But people who picked up Jalen Hurts and Tua cards, even leading up to the season, have seen an appreciation in price of 30 to 50%. In the case of Jalen Hurts, some of his cards have even doubled since the season began. And that's something that has happened this year for a few players over the course of the season with baseball as well. So like Aaron Judge's Bowman Chrome Prospect Gold Autograph BGS 9.5, that card could have been had for $5,000 last December. It's now most recently sold for $40,000. Mm-hmm. So there are these guys who sort of have breakout seasons, and the thing they seem to have in common is nobody really saw it coming, and all of a sudden those guys' markets are doing really well. But it gets washed away in the sea of other players who just sort of kind of meet expectations or maybe underperform expectations, and their markets don't nearly have the same level of enthusiasm and energy. So if you zoom in a little bit, you can find these success stories, you can find cautionary tales, find a little bit of everything.
No, that makes perfect sense. Yeah, good one. Like Troy and I talked about, I think it was even last week on our show, there's a really good player from the Avalanche, Nathan McKinnon, considered one of the easily top 10 NHL players, finally won the Stanley Cup last year, and it was really just, that was the expectation. So it really didn't move his value much. But I think where I'm taking away from what you're saying is, as hockey card collectors, it's really thinking about who are those guys that are really on the come up, that are poised to take that big step this year. And, those are the guys that will probably see the biggest gains versus the people that are already on top of the mountain when they really have almost nowhere to go but down, because they have to perform amazingly just to stay where they're at.
Absolutely. And I think to myself as a collector, collecting is a lot about emotion and fandom. So we don't really get to pick the players that we like necessarily. We just kind of, this guy speaks to me, so this is the one I collect. But if I was in football and I could have my choice of, would I rather be collecting Justin Herbert or like a guy like Tua or Jalen Hurts, And the biggest difference to me is that if I'm collecting Justin Herbert, I'm worried that I'm constantly standing at the edge of a cliff, just kind of looking over and hoping that I don't fall over. And whereas if I'm collecting a guy like Tua or a guy like Jalen Hurts, I'm like climbing a mountain slowly, and there's not much risk of slippage. There's not too much of a risk of falling back. I mean, there is a risk, but sure. I don't feel like I'm peering over the edge of a cliff every single Sunday. So, as a collector, I'd prefer to be probably with the player who seems a little underrated rather than the one who seems to be, all eyes on that guy and all the attention and the price excitement is going to that guy.
Are you guys noticing any trends right now between vintage or modern or different types of cards that seem to be performing well?
Well, what's interesting is it just really seems to be the case that a big headline sale can reinvigorate a category. And so I'm thinking now about how there's a Wagner T206 that's up for sale with Golden right now that's already going to shatter the previous price that particular card and that grade sold for. And that kind of goes along with the 52 Topps Mantle SGC 9.5 that sold for, I guess it was maybe 12.6 million recently with Heritage. And, that fits pretty neatly with the trends that we see. So based on the 4 indexes that Card Ladder has that are categorized by era rather than by sport, the 2 that are positive are pre-war vintage and then vintage itself. So pre-war vintage and vintage are 2 markets that over the last quarter are in the green, but not by much. The pre-war is up by 3% and vintage is up by 0.3%. But you contrast that against the modern and the ultra modern indexes, and those are down 12 and 13% respectively over the last quarter. So there's an undeniable market segmentation. The old stuff is doing well, and the new stuff not so much.
Gotcha. One of the terms that I've been hearing a lot lately, Chris, and I'm curious to get your perspective on, I'm not sure if you've heard this too, is the term replaceability. And so from what I understand what that means, and this comes, I think, from the perspective of what cards should you maybe choose to invest in, is that not only should we look at players or brands of cards that traditionally carry value, but we also need to look at replaceability in the sense that the less the card is replaceable, the better chance it has for longer term value. So I had to give an example to illustrate this. Let's say I had roughly $2,500, $3,000 to invest and I wanted to buy a hockey card. And if option A was to buy a 2015 Connor McDavid Young Guns, let's even say like a PSA 10, which goes for about $2,900 right now, but has a pop count of 2,300. Or if I spent a little bit less, $2,650 on a 2015 The Cup quad patch out of 99, that's a BGS 9.5, so both basically gem mint grades, where the whole concept of replaceability is, well, if I were to sell my Connor McDavid Young Guns, how easy would it be for me to replace that? It would be pretty easy because they're for sale every day, versus cards that you may own or you may choose to buy that would really be hard to replace. Does that make sense to you?
It makes perfect sense to me. And I think the trend over time is towards the cards that have the lowest replaceability score. So if a McDavid Pop 2300 Young Guns PSA 10 is maybe like a 6 on the replaceable scale, and Ronald Acuna Topps Update PSA 10, which has a population of about 22,000, if that's like a 10, those are, you could just walk outside and buy one from the local truck or something. That's exaggerated, but that's the most easily replaceable. It feels like you can just go to Walmart and get it at any time. And then on the total other end, is these monster one of one logo man or shield, or one of one black type of cards that come from the biggest and the best brands and that are the most difficult to replace. The trend has been clear over the last few years that people have been moving more and more closer to those cards that are lower on the replaceability scale. And it wasn't that way at the start. When a lot of new entrants cycled into the hobby in 2020, there was a big emphasis on cards that were highly transactable. Prism-based cards in basketball and football being a good example, but also, Topps Chrome rookies of guys like Kobe and LeBron, or the 86 Fleer Jordan, or, these were some of the cards from those sports that were heavily focused on. And it was actually thought by at least some people to be a good thing that the card had a high transaction volume, that it was very quote unquote liquid. That was thought to be a source of comfort, that the card can be, the price of the card is knowable at any time.
Yeah.
But instead, with this being a collectibles market after all, the fundamentals of what makes collectibles valuable has won over the last few years. And people have realized that it's probably better to have items that are difficult to replace, because those are going to be more coveted, and those are likelier to cause bidding wars and to cause people to want to go the extra distance to obtain that card, knowing that they might not be able to obtain it as easily in the future. So, and I think increasingly we're seeing the sports card market become a sort of a top 1% or a winner take all market.
Mm-hmm.
And what I mean by that is more and more a disproportionate amount of the gains are accruing in the most prestigious and best cards. And so even though, as I was kind of discussing how some of these indexes have been performing over the last year to 2 years, these indexes are methodologically limited. The indexes by design only include cards that have sold at least twice in the last year and at least once in the last 6 months. Well, that definitionally is going to exclude some of the most valuable and the most coveted cards in the hobby. And this is actually a problem that we're trying to solve right now by maybe developing an outlier index for Card Ladder.
Oh.
Is going to contain every card that doesn't qualify for the main indexes. And I'm pretty confident that when we construct the outlier index, or maybe we'll have multiple ones, that when we do construct and publish it, that index is probably going to show an opposite growth pattern to what we see in the indexes that are composed mostly of more highly transacted cards. And I'm not sure what to make of that trend, that increasingly we're going to see more and more Herbert, NT Shield 1 of 1 selling for $1.8 million. But here's the appeal. Here's the ultimate appeal of a card like that. Justin Herbert will only ever have one National Treasures Shield autograph 1 of 1 rookie patch autograph. Even if you look at his Prism Black, which sold for $1.1 million around the same time, subsequent issues of Prism will have Justin Herbert Prism Blacks. It won't be the rookie, but there will be other cool Prism Blacks of Herbert. NT only makes 1 RPA for each player. So that shield is probably fittingly perceived as being his best of the best card, his very, very best card. And there's only one of them. And I think cards like that are going to continue to draw the fascination of super high-end collectors. And they're going to continually pile and exclusively focus on stuff like that.
I think that's an important concept. Because I think what you're talking about in the case of Justin Herbert is that really becomes what the collecting universe considers as really true 1 of 1. Where I think and we've actually talked with Upper Deck from a hockey perspective about this specifically. I think one of the ways manufacturers are dealing with the increase of demand and growth in the hobby is they're producing more serial number cards, more 101s. We're seeing, I'm not sure if you noticed this, but with like Metal Universe Champions, we talked about that last week. There's a whole bunch of different now colors of PMGs that have come out within that. And so it's, you know, as they look to, you know, this one way to increase supply as opposed in the junk wax era of just pumping out billions of cards. But I think as the amount of special cards, quote unquote, becomes greater, then it'll be interesting to see how the hobby and all these different sports really reacts and adapts to that and identifies the pockets where it's like, yeah, sure, there's 700 101 Anthony Edwards cards or Connor McDavid cards, but this is really the real 101.
Absolutely. That's also why the history of the hobby and the history of different product brands and the history of important cards appearing in different important brands matters. And it'll increasingly matter as more products get released. You know, the basketball product offering is somewhere probably between 30 and 40 products on an annual basis. You know, there has to be a predictable, stable, consistent way of tiering out and ranking those products that's not arbitrary, so that we can ultimately decide what's the top dog, what's, you know, tier B, what's tier C. And we do have ways to do that. You know, we can look at the history of the different brands. We can look at, you know, the price points that the manufacturers release them at. We can look at, the fact that Mantle's iconic card is Topps is important to the legacy of the Topps brand. And the fact that Topps and Bowman are, you know, the two baseball brands to sort of anchor the 50s era of baseball, you know, all these things matter. And they're going to matter more and more, I think, as we try to make sense of an increasingly complex and diffuse marketplace.
No, I think that's a great thought. So I actually have a specific card ladder hockey question for you. When do you think we can, or I'm not sure if this is planned already, but when are we going to see the 2021 rookies in the card ladder hockey index?
Yeah, it's a great question. And let me just say that it's in the queue.
Okay.
But, I mean, one of the things that is like, for football, we really only have a handful of 2021 rookies. For basketball, we don't have any. And for hockey, we don't have any. As we kind of wait for more slabs to come on the market.
Oh, okay.
And we wait for sort of a slightly larger offering. You know, I mean, I know I'm preaching to the choir here, but in case anybody in the audience isn't aware, you still can go find sales of any card in the sales history feature.
Yeah.
But it's obviously important, too, that we build out verified card profiles for the 2021 rookie class in all the sports, because that's important for index construction. And it's very helpful for collection tracking for our users as well. So just know, I hear you, man. I just made a note, in fact. Let's get back and talk with the team and see where 2021 hockey rookies are at.
If we have to send Troy over there to key him in, I'm willing to do that, Chris.
I will appreciate that, Troy.
Yeah, well, I can put the list together. Nope. Remember what? It was funny, we were talking about, you know, Chris getting you into hockey. Christina, wasn't she asking us what hockey cards she should start collecting like a couple months ago?
Yeah, we're working on Christina too. That's
no, Christina. She won't take much of a push. I mean, she wants to really get into hockey. She's really the driving force who wants to watch the Stars games. So she's already primed and ready to go.
Well, last week, Chris, we mentioned that we have a new partnership with you guys where if anyone is interested in Card Ladder, that in using your service or even trying it out, we have a link just to let everyone know. Again, you can find it all over our social channels or in the description of the podcast. And I guess with that in mind, is there anything that we should know about from a Card Ladder perspective, like stuff you're working on or things that people can look forward to with your service?
Absolutely. First of all, we're very proud to have partnered with you guys. I think we identified you guys as high quality content creators, both on the social media space and in the podcast space very early on. And I'm so glad that we are teamed up with you guys. And over the next, let's call it 30 to 60 days, we're going to roll out some of the biggest feature offerings that we've ever done. And we've been a little quiet this summer as we've been working on some of this stuff, but we have some really big and cool stuff that from a tech and software-based standpoint, from a feature offering standpoint, that's going to be coming out in the next 1 to 2 months that we're super excited about. I wish I could say more about what it is, but I know your show is pretty widely listened to, and I wouldn't want to tip off any competitors. So let's just say that, look, there's going to be some really cool stuff, some really innovative, broadly applicable tech upgrades that's going to be pretty neat for collectors here in the next month or two.
Well, that's awesome. As Card Ladder power users, and what we told people last week too, is we were subscribers and daily users of your platform before we ever had a podcast. So it was very easy and natural for us to, want to work with you guys because we believe so much in your service and the value of it. But I'm curious from your perspective, because we just have our own personal experience to rely on. As collectors that you've gotten feedback over the years of people that use Card Ladder, what are like maybe the 1 or 2 kind of key core benefits that your subscribers have pointed back or pointed out to you where they really see value in your platform?
Well, I'll give you one example. A friend of mine recently did a deal for a Pele card. It's one of the very few Pele cards that features a game-used patch and an autograph from Pele. And he was deep into research, and he was negotiating a price for the card from the individual he was buying it from. But this card is so rare and difficult to price that it was going to be a negotiation and a back and forth no matter what. Just it was such a limited sales history and such a limited information set and such a desired card. Well, this gentleman who was doing his research through Card Ladder's sales history was able to use the database of images to locate a sale of this Pele that was being quoted to him as a comp for the card. And once he was able to find the card in Card Ladder's sales history, he was able to see a picture of it, and he was able to realize that this particular card had a 3-color patch that was much nicer than the patch on the card that he was negotiating for, which was just a 1-color patch. And so he was able to use that picture and use that comp to say, yeah, this is the most recent comp of this Pele card. But, if you check out the picture here, this was a 3-color patch. The one that we're bargaining over is a 1-color patch. And because of that, the purchase price was lowered by $5,000 on the card. And so he came and he told me the story, and he said, I'm going to be a Card Ladder user for life because you just saved me $5,000. I was going to pull the trigger at the price point, and then I went and I looked up the comp that was being quoted to me, and because of sales history and Card Ladder, I was able to find a picture, and the picture was able to show me that it wasn't a perfect apples to apples. That card had a nicer patch, and he saved $5,000.
Wow!
So that's a use case that I think is relatable to a lot of collectors, especially ones who are looking for a little bit rarer cards that are a little lower on the replaceability metric.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess the other use case would just be if you love cards, and this has always been my reason for wanting to have something like Card Ladder, is that if you just love cards, and it doesn't matter what segment of cards, Card Ladder just as a user experience makes the hobby more enjoyable and more fun. So you can just log on and start like flipping through indexes and sort of get lost in a maze of cards and a player's index or a category index or a sport index or something. Or you can go to the showcase feature and sort of look around and see what other users are uploading, what cool cards that they have in their collections. And if you want to reach out, maybe make a new friend, maybe reach out to somebody for whatever reason that you might have a collecting interest in common. You can build your own collection on there that you can share, that you can use the collection feature, which is extremely powerful to track the value of your cards. So maybe you have a verified card that has a verified card profile in our database. If that's the case, it's very easy tracking. But if not, you can still add the card and use some combination of indexes or multipliers. It's really a very user-driven approach. You can set up a valuation method, and you can tweak it and tinker with it and automate it till your heart's content. So there's a very powerful user feature. And I guess the final one, which is really important to me as a researcher, as the head researcher at Card Ladder, is that we have the only database in the hobby of verified card sales. And what that means is that myself or one of the other researchers on the team, 365 days a year, is reviewing every sale of every card that has a verified profile. And currently that's about 34,000 cards.
And that's a green check mark in the...
If there's a green check mark when you're looking at sales history, that means that a Card Ladder researcher vetted that sale, compared it against the sales history of the card, investigated that particular eBay listing, or if it's from a different auction house that we track, investigated that particular listing and approved that sale into the cards database. And so what that means is that it's not perfect. It's never going to be perfect, because there will be human error and there will be errors in judgment that we make from time to time as researchers. But it's the closest thing we can get to having a reliable sales database for 34,000 of the hobby's most important cards that a knowledgeable researcher has reviewed. And we are the only data platform, the only price guide, the only database in the hobby that does that, period. No other database in the hobby even has one verified card profile, let alone 34,000. So to me, that's a point of pride as a researcher. But maybe to a different Card Ladder user, it doesn't matter. They prefer to use the sales history, or they get a totally different use out of Card Ladder. But to me, somebody who is thinking long term about our hobby, I'm a person who really wants us to have a reliable, trustworthy, robust data composite that can be used by serious institutional level entities and people who may be interested in our space, but who need credible, clean, reliable data, historical data to base decisions upon. I think that's really important for our industry. So,
no, I think that's a great point. And I know we're running short of time, but I think a topic that Troy and I are passionate about, and I'm sure you are too, that I want to talk to you about at some point, is how does anyone convince eBay to standardize listings so that we get consistent? As we know, there's a million different ways you can list cards either correctly or incorrectly, and it makes doing research really difficult on that card. And eBay seems to have the power to really force some sort of standardization around that. But like I said, topic for a different day. Well, really do appreciate your time. We are excited, like I mentioned, to be working with you guys because we're big believers in your service, and hopefully we'll have you on again in a few months, and let's cross our fingers that we're talking about growth in the market.
Yeah, that sounds great. Thanks for having me, guys.
Thanks, Chris.
All right, Chris, thanks. Okay, I think that's great information by Chris. What did you think, Troy?
Oh, I liked it. We got into some different topics than I expected, and it was awesome. And he actually, I told him this on the interview. The couple questions I had written down, he actually got right into them. So we like to say that great minds think alike. So I think it was an awesome interview. Lots of good information, and listening to the stuff he says about other sports, how you can kind of apply that to hockey. Take it what you will from it. But it was really, really good interview.
Yeah, that's why I like having him on, is the big picture perspective and looking at, it's our job to get into the micro, right? Into the weeds from a hockey perspective, but it's nice. They're a big data company, so they see millions and millions of sales, and that gives you a really interesting perspective on the sports card collecting market. So again, really grateful to have him on the show. Okay, let's go into new product releases. So Artifacts release week. Artifacts should be out today, the 28th, the day that we're releasing the podcast. We talked a lot about that, I think, last week or the week before, and definitely talked a lot with Tony last week when we interviewed him from Upper Deck. So if you didn't have a chance to check that out and you want to learn more about the Artifacts release, definitely recommend you going back and taking a listen. Other than that, it was kind of interesting. So one of the things I noticed, Troy, is on the big, especially the US retailers like David Adams or Steel City or Blowout, they pushed a lot of these releases that had been with holding dates that we've talked about, right? We're just kind of, we don't know where else to put this, so we're going to put it this date into November. So not just back till the end of October, but almost towards the end of November. And it's really actually kind of hard right now to figure out what's coming out next. The only set that I could find that doesn't seem to be in one of those pure holding dates is on a number of sites we're seeing Ultimate Collection for 2021, 22. So it'd be the Cider, Caulfield, Zegras rookie class is right now scheduled at 10/26. Right. So all the other sets are like at 11/30.
Yeah.
Or the holding date tends to be the last day of the month.
Yep.
But this is weirdly at 10/26. So my thought is, and this is me like connecting 12 million dots and coming up with my own crazy theories. So I'm just trying to say it's not firsthand information I've been given is, well, if the next thing to come out were to be Ultimate Collection, and they're not going to wait between September 28th for Artifacts and October 26th in between sets. So what's the one thing that doesn't have any date whatsoever? That would be 2020 The Cup.
Yeah.
And we had the designs leaked last week, and those are now up on Beckett and Cardboard Connection and all these other sites. So could it mean that in the next few weeks we could see the Cup?
Let's hope so.
Yeah, well, for the very least, we'll stop getting asked about it.
Yeah.
I love that people think we know, but we don't know. We have
it's all secret. It's like Tony said, it's Fight Club. Like, no one talks about it.
The only thing that would be weird to me about that scenario is you would think that they wouldn't put out the Cup and then Ultimate Collection back to back, would you?
I don't know. I've almost given up on trying to. I mean, they're trying to catch up. They're doing the best they can, but this, I don't know. I just want to see the Cup. Not that I'm going to buy a box, but I just want to see them get ripped.
Yeah, there also is no checklist out from the Cup yet, and as we've gotten to learn and know ourselves, right, that's the clearest indicator that any set is imminent. And I will make a plea to everybody out there, if somehow you do get inside information and you want to give us tips when stuff is coming out, and that would avoid the mindless daily research where I go and I check every site for the 4,000th time, that would be amazing. So feel free to message us on Facebook or Instagram. If you happen to have any inside info, we'll definitely take it. It'll be interesting, Troy, to see how Artifacts does. We'll be tracking the sales and values. We're kind of pumped ourselves to get a little bit of the product in our hands. Yeah, beyond Artifacts, not a lot going on. Okay, personal pickups. This isn't an embarrassing segment for us. We actually have some stuff to get through here. So we'll start with you, Troy.
Yeah, it's like the triumphant return. I feel like I should have like a sound effect that's just like, oh. No, we have from the pitiful 0 cards I think I had for a couple weeks. It picked up. So first card I got was a 2020-21 clear cut Pekka Rinne canvas auto blue signature out of 25. Very cool card. I love the look of the canvas autos in the clear cut release. I think they're great. So I bought one of them. Second card was a 2019-20 Upper Deck The Cup Pekka Rinne out of 249. It's just the base card, but I really like the design on it, so I picked it up. It was like $3, so it was a good cheap pickup to add to the PC. And then I also picked up a 2008-2009 OPC 1979-80 retro Pekka Rinne. So it was a Pekka Rinne card in the design of the 79-80 series. Obviously, the Gretzky rookie year. It was just a super cool design, and I have to give a thank you to Irish Flyer Collector on Instagram for sending me a note about the listing. So thank you for that, and that led to my purchase of it. And then also from Irish Flyer Collector, he actually sent us a couple cards. Pekka Rinne 2020-21 Upper Deck Series 2 base. He sent me a couple of those, which is really cool. And then he also sent me an Ottinger retro marquee rookie, a couple of those out of OPG Platinum. Very cool, very grateful. Josh will mention he sent us a couple other treats that we really enjoyed.
Yeah, this dude is amazing. He is very sweet, very nice. He's got an amazing Flyers collection.
Yep.
He's also into Boba Fett cards, which I was fascinated by Boba Fett growing up. So definitely his Instagram is worth checking out and following. It's at Irish Flyers Collector. So please be sure to do it. And thank you to him. You guys don't have to send us stuff, but it's definitely amazing that he did that. And we're very grateful. Okay, so from my standpoint, I actually bought 4 cards this week. I got a 2019 OPG Platinum. This is kind of a big one for me, Troy. It's a Nick Suzuki marquee rookie seismic gold out of 50. You've actually seen this. It's pretty minty. I mean, this one, it's not very nice.
It's very gorgeous. It looks awesome. The gold looks really sweet. The corners were just perfect. Really cool.
I got it at an LCS. They had it listed for $200. I offered $180 and they took it. So that's another reminder. It doesn't hurt to throw out an offer.
Yep.
They could say no, and that's fine, right? But definitely don't assume that the price is necessarily the price in this hobby. Feel free to throw it, but make it reasonable. I mean, don't offer someone $10 for a $200 card. So I was excited to get that. I'll probably flip that as the season starts. I did actually have a PC purchase, though, that I'm pretty excited about. So I got a 2020 Upper Decker UD Game Dated Kirill Kaprizov. This is a gold version, so it's numbered out of 100. It commemorates him reaching the Wild rookie point record. Got a pretty good deal for just raw for $27, so I thought that was a good deal. I also bought a couple other investment / flip cards. I've been doing a lot of reading on last year's rookie, and I'm a little bit high on Alexander Holtz from the Devils. And so I thought I got a pretty okay deal on a Upper Deck canvas or Young Guns canvas out of Extended for $12.50. And then I also out of Extended, I got the Young Guns checklist was JJP, John Jason Paterka, and Moritz Seider, who obviously drives a lot of interest and has a lot of collectability within the hobby. Got the Young Guns checklist canvas black. Well, that's a mouthful.
Nah.
For $30. So I thought that was a pretty good deal. All right. Well, that's the show for the week. Thank you all for listening. We hope you enjoyed. If you're not following us on any of our socials, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, YouTube, Twitter, just search Hockey Cards Gongshow, and we're pretty easy to find, and would definitely appreciate if you guys gave us a follow. Also, as we mentioned at the top of the show, we've launched a Patreon account, and the link is in the show description. We would be, if you are able to support us through that, we would be grateful for that, and hope you all have an amazing week. And we can't wait to be back next week for another episode of The Gong Show. Have a great one.